Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about graphing equations and seeing are they linear. Well, there's a lot of ways we can determine if something is linear. You can make a table out of its data values, you can graph it like we're going to do today, uh, all sorts of things really. But before we really get into this, let's make sure we know what the term linear means. Linear means a line that has an unchanging, or sorry, I guess I should say a constant rate of change, meaning that every time it goes over 1 on the x-axis, it goes up an equivalent amount on the y-axis. Over 1, up 3, over 1, up 3, just like that, right? So let's put it in some layman's terms, though. A linear equation is it's going to look like a straight line. If we graph it, I mean horizontal, vertical, diagonal, just a straight line. No twists and turns, no changing direction, nothing like that. So you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen here, I have a bunch of equations. And we're going to graph all of these in a program called Desmos, which if you've never used Desmos, I would highly recommend it. It is a fantastic program for any level of mathematics. It is a free graphing tool that you can get online or that you can access through the internet. But let's go ahead and try out these equations. We're going to graph them, and we're going to see, are they linear? Well, we have y equals the square root of x. Well, let's turn on that graph. That one doesn't look linear to me, right? Like, got that beginning there, it just does this little turn. Not linear. That one didn't work. Next up, though, we have y equals x to the third. So instead of having a square root in front of it, we have an exponent on the variable. Maybe that'll change some things. Well, that's a different line, but it's not a linear line still. This one's doing some twisting and turning around right in the middle, so that one's out. Not linear there either. Our third option, though, says y equals 3x, so we're just trying out a coefficient. Oh, now that one looks like it works. We could investigate this looking up above, looking up below, but it looks pretty well to be linear to me. And in fact, it is. So this one is a good solution for us. Y equals 3x is a linear equation. We're going to talk about why that is a little later in the video, but let's investigate the rest of these first. Now our next one says y equals 2 over x. So here we have x in a denominator, and that is an insane graph, right? Like, look at that. If you've ever seen a crazy graph, like, that's it. That's two completely separate lines. They're just like twisting around the x and y axis. Like, it's something, but it sure ain't linear. Maybe that's a topic for a little farther in mathematics, right? All right, let's try out y equals x squared. Here we have what's actually called a parabola, but definitely not a straight line. That line changes direction right in there, so that's out. We have y equals 3.8. Now that is a straight line. It's horizontal, but it looks to me like it's a straight line as far as we can see, and it's true. That is a straight line. Finally, we have y equals the absolute value of x. And that too, not quite straight. Now, if we just looked at part of it, like, that looks like a straight line. But whenever we look at the origin, we see that it pretty clearly changes directions there, and it starts going off in a perpendicular manner, actually. So we had two lines, y equals 3x and y equals 3.8. Both of those were perfectly straight lines. They are linear equations. Now the reason for this is because they both fit the mold of y equals mx plus b. That's the deal. So I know there's a lot of variables here, and that can look a little confusing. But the fact of the matter is, as long as we have an equation that says y equals, which I mean all of these do, so that's fine, but y equals, here's the important parts. You see this x? It needs to be just regular old x, no crazy exponent on it, but it can have whatever coefficient it wants. That m value right there is actually something we call slope, which we'll be talking about in a future video. We'll get into what the heck slope is, but that can be any number in the world. Just like right here, we had a 3 right in front of that x. Well, that would have been m in this case. It would have been any given coefficient. So that's fine. You want a coefficient in front of there? Cool. But what the x cannot have is an exponent on it, a square root in front of it. It can't be in a denominator like we saw over here on the fourth one. It just needs to be plain old simple x with maybe a number in front. And then lastly, we have this letter B. Now, I know B is kind of a weird letter. What the heck does that stand for? It actually stands for something we call a constant. A constant is a number without a variable. So what this is saying is that we can have any given number, even if, no x on it, no nothing, just kind of like 3.8, and that's totally fine. You just have that constant, that number that's not changing because it doesn't have a variable there. That's okay to be part of a linear equation. Whether we have this beginning stuff or not, if it says y equals the constant, we got a straight line. Now we could have both of these. Now let me go to show that here real quick. We could have y equals 5x. Well, that makes a straight line. You can see it's graphed right there. Maybe we wanted y equals 5x plus 3. Well, guess what? That's still a straight line. And then what if we just had y equals 3? Still a straight line. So that's kind of how I like to think about this. I like to think just about the most complicated equation we could ever be looking at in terms of linear stuff is this right here. Y equals 7x plus 3. Now I'm just making up those numbers, but a coefficient, an x, and a whole number, or a constant, a number without a variable. That's about as complicated as linear equations get. If you take away any one of these parts, it's still linear. What we cannot do is add other things to it. All right. Hopefully this helped a little bit. I'm going to have a second video talking about taking an equation, putting numbers into it, and graphing that line, so be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you all later.